As the sun dipped below the horizon, long after Eli had arrived, the sky rumbled again. Lightning cracked like a whip, the trees along the shore bowed their heads, and the old boat rocked gently on the waves. In the distance, thunder grumbled like a half-remembered threat. But here, under the shelter of the large stone, Eli felt safe. Warm air rose from the crack in the earth where he had stepped ashore. Water dripped from the cloak draped over his lap, leaving dark stains on the moss below. Beside him, the keeper stirred. Slowly, she turned her head, revealing a face creased with time and etched with stories. Her eyes, the color of the rainy sky, regarded him with a gentle intensity. Eli shifted, suddenly self-conscious. He looked away. To break the silence, he gestured to the lanterns, their flames dwindling in the gathering darkness. "Do they call to you?" he asked. The keeper followed his gaze, a faint smile touching her lips. "Not anymore," she said, her voice as soft as the rain that still whispered against the pines. Then, as if remembering something, she added, "But they used to." She paused, watching the flames. "A long time ago," she continued, her gaze distant. "The people of the nearby village would light lanterns and set them adrift on the lake. They floated here, across the water, carried by the wind and the current, just like you." She turned back to Eli, her eyes searching his. "And I would wait, just like now. And when the lanterns reached me, I would take them, one by one, and carry them back. I walked those paths you see there," she said, gesturing vaguely into the swirling mist, "until I couldn't anymore." Her voice cracked. "Until the rain fell too hard or the wind blew too cold, and the lanterns grew fewer and farther between, and so I stopped waiting." Eli swallowed. He looked past the keeper, back to the darkening lake. "Do you think they'll come tonight?" he asked softly. The keeper shrugged. "I don't know. It's been many years since anyone came here. Many, many years." Another long silence fell between them, broken only by the rain and the sigh of the wind. Eli shifted restlessly, pulling at a loose thread on his coat. He wanted to go home, to curl up by the hearth in his room, with a book and a cup of hot cocoa, but something kept him there. A pull toward the story, toward this place where memories lingered like mist. Finally, unable to contain his curiosity any longer, he asked, "Why did they stop sending the lanterns?" The keeper's gaze drifted back to the lake, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "They say forgetting is a kind of mercy," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the rain. Eli frowned, not understanding. "Forgetting what?" The keeper hesitated, then turned back to him, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. "Forgetting love," she whispered. "They forgot how to love." Before Eli could respond, the rain suddenly intensified, drumming against the pines, lashing against the shore. Wind tore through the trees, and the lake roiled, waves crashing against the stony beach. The keeper stiffened, her body pulled tight as if bracing for something. Eli stared at her, then at the churning lake, fear tightening his throat. What had he awakened? The keeper stood abruptly, knocking over the lantern. Its flames sputtered and died. Darkness pressed in around them, deeper than the night itself. Eli gasped. "I didn't mean," he stammered, reaching for the fallen lantern. But the keeper raised a hand, silencing him. "It's all right," she said, her voice strangely calm in the midst of the storm. "It's all right now." She stepped forward, pressing something into his hand. Eli opened it. A single white feather, soft and warm, pulsed with a gentle light. The keeper laid a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly strong. "Take this," she whispered. "Hold it close, and do not let go until the first light touches the mountains." Then, before Eli could ask any questions, she was gone, melting back into the shadows as quickly as she had emerged from them. Alone again, Eli clutched the feather tight, its warmth spreading through his chest. He listened to the wind screaming in the pines, the waves crashing on the shore. Fear coiled in his stomach, but beneath it, something else stirred, something akin to excitement, a thrill that sent goosebumps prickling across his skin. He took a deep breath, holding the feather out before him. The storm raged on, but in his heart, a tiny flame flickered to life. When the first hint of dawn touched the tops of the pines, Eli knew it was time. He hurried down the muddy path leading away from the lake. Behind him, the sky was lightening, the clouds parting to reveal glimpses of the mountains. At the fork in the path, he paused, clutching the feather tightly. He could return home now, slip back into his quiet life, pretend the night had been nothing more than a dream. But something kept him there, a sense of purpose that surprised him. He straightened his shoulders, walking forward, deeper into the woods. The trees parted, revealing a sight that made him gasp. Sunlight streamed through breaks in the canopy, dappling the forest floor in gold. The air buzzed with the songs of unseen birds. And there, in the center of it all, nestled among the trees, was a small cottage. Smoke curled from its chimney, painting lazy patterns against the clear blue sky. Flowers bloomed in the window boxers, and the scent of fresh bread drifted through the open door. Eli stepped closer, his heart pounding. Was this real or a figment of his storm-tossed imagination? Hesitantly, he reached out and knocked. The knock echoed in the stillness, swallowed by the trees. Eli waited. A moment stretched into an eternity, and he began to lose hope. Just as he was about to turn away, the door opened. A woman stood framed in the doorway. Her face, framed by a mess of wind-blown hair, was filled with kindness. She smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Well, hello there," she said, her voice like warm honey. "What brings you to my humble abode?" Eli stammered, surprised by her cheerfulness. I don't know," he admitted sheepishly. I saw the smoke and remembered the stories." The woman's smile widened. "Ah, yes, the stories," she said, her gaze drifting to the feather still clutched in Eli's hand. "So you found this, did you? Well, that means you're here for a reason." She gestured for Eli to enter the cottage. Come in. You must be tired and hungry after your journey." Inside, the cottage was even more enchanting than the outside. A fire crackled merrily in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls adorned with colorful tapestries. The scent of baking bread mingled with the sweet aroma of wild berries. On the table, a feast awaited, laden with cheeses, fruits, and breads. Eli sat down, his earlier fears and uncertainties forgotten. The woman bustled around the room, setting out plates and pouring steaming mugs of apple cider. "Eat," she said, her voice filled with motherly concern. "You look as though you haven't eaten in days." As Eli ate, the woman hummed a cheerful tune, her nimble fingers working deftly. When he had finished, she cleared the table, and they sat in comfortable silence for a while. Eli felt a sense of peace settle over him, a feeling he had never known before. Finally, he spoke, his voice hesitant. "Who are you?" The woman turned, her smile sad but kind. "I am the keeper of stories," she said softly. "And you, Eli, are the one who has come to remember. For my fellow book lovers, this is a stop on the blog tour for Legends and Lattes, hosted by the amazing team at Rockstar Book Tours. Make sure to check out the other videos in this series. Also make sure to leave a comment down below with your favorite comfort drink, because we giving away 3 gift cards, and you won't want to miss out. The late afternoon sun bled through the trees, painting the forest floor in orange and gold. Eli adjusted his pack, wincing at the scrape on his shoulder. It was nothing more than a scratch, just like every other cut he'd gotten during his travels. Nothing to complain about. Really, it was just annoying how even the smallest nick would remind him of how little time he had left. He reached the clearing just as the sun dipped below the tree line. A shiver ran down his spine. It wasn't from the cold. This place, tucked away in the whispering woods, had been a sanctuary for as long as he could remember. As a kid, he'd come here to escape bullies, or bad dreams, or just a bad mood. Now he came because he couldn't outrun the darkness gathering in his heart. In the center of the clearing sat a weathered stone, well, the kind meant for wishing, except no wishes were ever made here. For Eli, it was a place of memories, a place of goodbyes. He sank to the ground beside the well, pulling his worn teddy bear from his pack. Patches of fur hung on by a thread. One ear was caved in, and one eye stared sightlessly into the middle distance. The only sound was the wind sighing through the trees. Eli knew this would be the last time he'd visit the woods. Soon, he wouldn't even have the strength to carry his lantern. He reached inside his pack for the small oil lamp. It was the most precious thing he owned, filled with moonlight captured by spider lilies, and kept in a hollow reed. Carefully, he poured a few drops of the glowing liquid onto the wick. It sputtered, then burst into life, casting dancing shadows on the moss-covered stones. As the light spread, something shifted in the deepening gloom and gasped. Out across the misted water, a dozen lights began to appear, one by one, like stars breaking through night. Each one flickered, paused, then grew steady. Some were low to the water, some higher on unseen shores. Each one was a lantern, glowing against the sorrowed dusk. They were never lost, the figure said, voice as old as rustling leaves, only waiting to be seen. Eli started, whirling around to see the keeper of the woods emerge from behind a nearby oak, robes rippling in the breeze, staff tapping softly on the ground. His hood was pulled low, hiding his features in the shadows. "Who are they?" Eli asked, eyes fixed on the water. "Memories, promises, goodbyes. Each flame is a story someone left behind. Sometimes they flicker back into the world when someone remembers." Eli looked down at his own lantern. "And mine?" The keeper smiled just slightly. "Yours is the first, in many years to come willingly. Most are carried by the rain." A hush passed between them. The lake, now aglow, no longer felt lonely. Eli traced patterns in the dirt with the toe of his boot. "I thought I came alone." "You did," the keeper replied. "But the lake remembers everyone." The keeper stood slowly, robes trailing in the wet earth. "You can stay, if you wish. The lake always welcomes those who bring light." He didn't need to ask Eli twice. What better place to spend his last days than here, surrounded by the echoes of laughter and love? By morning, his bones would ache and his hands would tremble. But as long as the lantern held out, he could watch the fireflies dance among the lilies and listen to the frogs sing their nightly chorus. Night fell, and the wind picked up, whipping the trees into a frenzy. Rain began to fall, fat drops splashing on the surface of the lake. Eli pulled his shawl tighter and hugged his knees to his chest. A flash of lightning illuminated the angry sky. Thunder rumbled in the distance. "It's just like the stories," he whispered, half to himself. "What is?" the keeper asked. "When my mother used to tuck me in at night, she'd tell me tales of fireflies who danced with the moon and stars, of brave little lanterns keeping the darkness at bay. She called this place Lantern Lake. I never understood why." The keeper sighed. "Because this is where the veil between worlds is thinnest, where the memories of men linger long. This is a place of endings and beginnings, of goodbyes and promises. This is where the lost are found." Another crack of thunder echoed across the clearing, followed by a blinding flash. The trees swayed violently. The lake, normally placid and still, churned and frothed. Wind whipped at Eli's clothes. The lantern in his hands threatened to go out. Then from the corner of his eye, he saw another light appear, struggling to rise from the churning water. At first, it was faint, flickering in the wind, but it grew steadier, brighter, until finally it hovered above the surface, no longer a flame, but a will. A will to live, a will to hope, a will to remember. Eli scrambled back, knocking his lantern over in the process. The oil lamp tumbled end over end before landing in a puddle. It extinguished with a hiss. All around him, the other lights flickered and faded, sucked back into the water by the gathering storm. He slumped to the ground, burying his face in his hands. Was this the end? Would he fade away and become another forgotten memory? The last thing he remembered was a searing pain in his chest, like a needle stabbing him through the ribs. Then everything went black. He woke to the sound of drumming rain and a gentle nudge. Groaning, Eli opened his eyes to find the keeper kneeling beside him, concern creasing his usually impassive features. "You fainted," the keeper said, his voice echoing in Eli's ears. "Your lantern's out. Do you want me to?" No, Eli interrupted, scrambling back. He knew what the keeper was offering, what it meant to extinguish his remaining light, to surrender himself to the night. He shook his head, clutching at the tattered bear. Not yet. The keeper inclined his head in understanding, then gestured toward the well. Your mother's here. She wants to speak with you. Eli hesitated. It had been so long since he'd seen her. Had she come to take him home, to scold him for staying away for so long, to tell him goodbye? The keeper laid a hand on his shoulder, his touch surprisingly warm. She's not here to hurt you, Eli. With trembling hands, Eli pushed himself to his feet. The clearing spun around him and he swayed, catching himself on the keeper's arm. The woods seemed darker now, the air colder. The wind had died down, leaving only the relentless drumming of the rain. He stumbled to the well's edge and peered into the murky depths. The rain had stopped, but the wind picked up again, sending shivers down his spine. A faint glow pulsed beneath the surface, beckoning him closer. Fear warred with curiosity, but it was his mother's light. Who knew when he'd get another chance to see her? He took a deep breath and stepped forward. Once upon a time, deep in a wood where sunlight sifted through leaves to paint dappled patterns on the ground, there lived a creature of myth and magic. They called him the Keeper of the Lake. Some said he was a spirit of the wild. Some said a trickster god. Others claimed he wasn't real at all, only a story to keep children from wandering too far into the whispering woods. But those who had seen him spoke of emerald skin like moss, eyes like polished amber, and hair the color of sunlight through leaves. And most wondrous of all, he carried a lantern that burned with stars. One evening, long before the sun dipped below the tree line, a boy named Eli left the safety of the village and slipped into the green wood. His heart pounded a wild tattoo against his ribs like a trapped bird. Behind him, the last rays of sun bled into the horizon, staining the sky bruises of purple and red. And as shadows stretched and twisted around him, fear coiled in his gut like a hibernating snake. Eli pushed on, though deeper and deeper into the woods until the trees closed overhead, turning the fading daylight into a dusky twilight. Then he saw it, nestled between ancient trunks, a clearing bathed in an ethereal glow, and in its center, a figure unlike any he had ever seen. He was tall and slender with skin the color of moss-covered stones and eyes that gleamed like polished amber. Sunlight filtered through a tangle of leaves overhead, setting his hair aflame with gold. In one hand, he held a lantern that cast dancing shadows on the surrounding trees, each flicker a tiny star. Eli froze, unsure if he should approach or flee. The creature turned, catching sight of him, and a slow smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his amber eyes. Well met, little one, he said, his voice like the rustling of leaves. I have been expecting you. Eli blinked, startled. Expecting me, he echoed, unsure what the strange being meant. The creature nodded, gesturing to the lantern in his hand. Come, sit with me a while. The night is young, and there are stories yet untold. Hesitantly, Eli stepped closer, drawn by the flickering light and the promise of tale. As the night deepened, the keeper of the lake shared stories of the ancient wood, of spirits that danced in moonlit glades, and magic woven into the very fabric of the forest. Eli listened, captivated, his fear forgotten. When a first hint of dawn touched the sky, the creature fell silent. It is time for you to return, he said, his voice tinged with sadness. The light is fading, and I must rest. Eli scrambled to his feet, suddenly remembering his fear. What he blurted out, his voice trembling. The keeper of the lake smiled enigmatically, his eyes twinkling with starlight. I am the guardian of this wood, he said cryptically, the keeper of its secrets and its dreams. But if you seek my true name, look to the light within you, for it burns with the same flame. With that enigmatic answer, the keeper faded, leaving Eli alone in the clearing as the first rays of sunlight chased away the darkness. Eli stumbled back to the village, his mind racing with the fantastical tales and cryptic words of the keeper of the lake. The other villagers regarded him with suspicion and fear, their whispers echoing his name like a curse. He tried to warn them, to tell them about the wonders he had seen. But his words fell on deaf ears. They saw only a troubled child lost in a world of fantasy, and they shut their doors and windows tight, refusing to listen to his warnings. Eli, wounded and confused, retreated into himself, seeking solace in the whispering woods. Days turned into weeks, and Eli found himself drawn back to the lake, compelled by an unseen force. Each time he approached, the clearing was empty, the keeper nowhere to be found. But Eli wasn't alone, for, hidden in the shadows, watching him, was a creature of malice and might. It had waited patiently, biding its time until it could strike when the villagers needed him most. One evening, a thick fog rolled into the village, seeping through cracks in homes and chilling hearts with its touch. People huddled around fires, their faces etched with worry and fear. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the night. Young Mina, who had ventured out despite the danger, had vanished into the fog. Panic seized the villagers. Accusations flew, and soon suspicion fell on Eli. They believed he had lured the girl away, sacrificing her to the mythical being he had conjured in his stories, without a moment's thought for his innocence. They surged toward the forest, torches held high, ready to burn both him and the woods to the ground. But Eli knew he couldn't outrun them, not in this suffocating fog. So he did the only thing he could. He walked into the heart of the forest and called out, "Wait, I know where she is." The villagers hesitated, surprise momentarily halting their vengeful pursuit. Could the boy who had brought nothing but misfortune upon them actually lead them to their child? They exchanged uneasy glances, but desperation lent credence to Eli's words. "Lead on," the village elder finally said, his voice hoarse with worry. Following winding paths and over fallen logs, Eli led them deeper and deeper into the woods, their shouts gradually fading into the thick fog. All at once, the trees thinned, revealing the clearing. In the center, an eerie silence reigned, broken only by the distant sobs of the villagers. And there in the middle, they found Mina, safe and sound, kneeling beside the familiar lantern. At its glow sat the keeper of the lake, his amber eyes filled with amusement. "You came," he said, his voice a gentle breeze rustling through leaves. Eli nodded, unable to speak. The keeper gestured to Mina with a slight tilt of his head, and she rose, unharmed, her eyes shining with wonder. The villagers rushed forward, enveloping Mina in a protective circle, their earlier anger forgotten. They turned their attention to Eli, their expression shifting from hostility to gratitude. The village elder, his face etched with concern moments before, now beamed with relief. "Thank you, Eli," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "You have saved us all." And so it was that Eli's tale took a turn. From being an outcast, feared and misunderstood, he became the hero of the hour, celebrated for saving young Menina. But amidst the cheers and thanks, he noticed something peculiar. The keeper of the lake was gone, vanished without a trace, leaving only the faint scent of moss and a whisper of magic in his wake. Still, Eli knew in his heart that their paths would cross again, for the keeper had spoken of a special bond between them, a connection forged in moonlight and starlight, and deep in the wood, where sunlight dripped through leaves like liquid gold. Eli felt a pull, a beckoning from the heart of the forest. Then one night, a storm brewed in the usually placid lake. Waves crashed against the shore, whipping the surface into a frenzy. Rain lashed down, blurring the world into shades of gray and green. Lightning split the sky, briefly illuminating a face framed by golden hair. Fear tightened his throat, a premonition of what was to come. The next morning, the world was rinsed clean. Mist rose from the lake, like breath from a dreaming giant, and the trees held jeweled droplets at the tips of their leaves. The lanterns from the night before were gone, vanished like a vision after waking, except for one, Eli's own, still burning softly beside the stone. He had fallen asleep beneath an old pine, wrapped in most-scented dreams. But something had changed in him. The boy who opened his eyes felt quieter, steadier, as if the lake had left an imprint on his chest, a weightless shape that hummed in rhythm with the wind. The keeper was gone. No footprints, no sign of passage, just the echo of that voice. "You can stay if you wish." Eli stood and lifted his lantern. The flame inside leaned toward the forest path behind him, then swayed toward the lake. Uncertain, he looked across the still water, now blank again, no glowing stars, no voices calling from the mist. But he remembered, and memory, he now understood, was its own kind of light. Back in the village, people were sweeping porches and hanging herbs to dry. Chickens scratched the softened earth, and smoke curled from chimneys with a scent of pine and wild mint. No one noticed the boy at first, mood-stained, lantern in hand, eyes full of something not entirely his. When they did, they watched him silently. Old Marta, who rarely left her corner by the hearth, looked up and said, "He's seen them." Eli didn't speak much that day, not even when the schoolmaster asked where he had been. He simply placed the lantern on the windowsill of his home, his mother's home, and let the soft glow spill across the floorboards. That night, it rained again, and as he lay in his narrow bed, listening to the droplets drumming the roof, he felt a warmth against his ribs, an ember, invisible, but alive. Hey everyone, welcome to this channel. Today, we're going to be looking at an extract from The Keeper of Lost Things by Ruth Aseki. And as always, I want to remind you that these videos are written and prepared by teachers for educational purposes, not by scholars or academics. So let's jump in. The previous evening, he returned to the lake, not to ask questions, but to listen. The trail seemed shorter now, familiar, as if it had always been waiting for him to return. He reached the shore and saw no lanterns, no boat, no keeper, only the hush of mist rolling over water and reeds swaying like whispers. But he knew what to do. He placed the lantern at the same stone and sat beside it. Okay, so first things first. Who is he? Well, the passage doesn't explicitly tell us, but we know from previous contexts that he is a boy who recently moved to the village. We also know that he is the one who previously asked the keeper why the lake didn't reflect the sky. The most important thing we need to know about him right now is that he is open to listening to the stories that the lake has to tell. Remember, listening is a key element in storytelling. If you don't listen, you miss the story. And look at how the author uses language to emphasize this idea of listening. She says, "The trail seemed shorter now." Notice the word seemed. This is a key moment. When he decides to just see what happens, he goes back to the lake and he sits down next to the stone and places his lantern there. Now, despite the fact that he hasn't received any answers, I think it's fair to say that he believes there are answers waiting for him here. And of course, he's willing to listen. What kind of answers might he find here? What kind of stories? Well, let's find out. Night fell gently. Rain came, slow and sweet, and one by one, the lights returned. This time they came in colors. Some glowed golden, like hearth. Others were blue-white, like moonlight trapped in glass. One pulsed with the soft pink of spring plum blossoms, and another flickered green, like light through forest leaves. We can see here that once he's ready to listen, night falls gently. There's a beautiful alliteration there. And one by one, the lights returned. Imagine seeing this for the first time. You're sitting there and you're like, what the hell? What's happening? What are these colors? And each one is described using similes. There, compared to other objects. So you have the gold, which is like hearth fire. You have the blue-white, which is like moonlight trapped in glass. The pink one pulses with the soft color of spring plum blossoms. And then finally, you have the green one, which flickers like light through forest leaves. So what we have here is a sense of community. These aren't random colors. These are colors that the villagers would be familiar with. They've experienced these kinds of colors, and we can assume that these colors represent different people. So what do you think? How does the author make the colors seem so significant? One pulsed with the soft pink of spring plum blossoms, and another flickered green, like light through forest leaves. Eli watched, breath held. Then he noticed something new. A small flame drifting toward him across the lake. It hovered inches above the water, unmoored. A soft violet light, Now he's noticing something else entirely new. A small flame is drifting towards him. Can you imagine how strange this must be? You were sitting by a lake, and you see this little flame floating across the surface of the water. What does it mean? Why is it coming to him? Well, the author describes it, using more similes. It hovered inches above the water, unmoored, a soft violet light. Again, we have more comparisons, but this one is slightly different because it compares the flame to something that it's not. It's not a boat, but it's hovering on the surface of the water like a boat. It's a flame, but it's not flickering like the other ones. It's just this unmoored floating flame. And it's described as soft, violet. So it's almost like it's hesitant, shy. Let's keep going and see what happens. As it approached, it pulsed with a rhythm delicate like a child's heartbeat. He reached out. The flame didn't burn. Instead, it settled into his palm like a sigh, and within it, he saw a picture. A young girl, hair in braids, clutching a wooden bird carved from driftwood. Her eyes shone with wonder. She was laughing somewhere near this very lake many years ago. This is a key moment in the story. The flame comes to him, and he reaches out to touch it, and it doesn't burn him. Instead, it settles into his palm like a sigh. It's interesting to note that all of these descriptions are extremely sensory. You can see the colors. You can hear the rain. You can feel the flame settling into his hand. And then finally, you can see the picture that appears within it. It's like he's reaching into the flame and pulling out a memory. This is what the lake does. It gives memories, and this particular memory seems to be connected to the girl. So what do you think? What do you notice about the way the author uses language? The image faded. The flame rose from his hand and floated back into the mist. Eli looked down at his lantern. Its light had deepened, and now carried threads of violet within the gold. The keeper's voice returned to him, like a wind in his chest. Each flame is a story someone left behind. So the image fades and the flame returns to the lake. But the most important thing that happens here is that his own lantern changes. His lantern now has these threads of violet within the gold. And it's like the voice is saying, each flame is a story someone left behind. Is the flame gone forever? Well, no, because it's become part of his lantern. And now his lantern can carry stories as well. Do you remember the pool of light from the beginning? Well, this is what it's for. This is how he pays it forward. That night, Eli did not return home. He stayed by the stone, tending the flame, listening. And in the days that followed, others began to come. First was Mara, the baker's daughter, who had always wandered too far from the village. Then, who had stopped speaking after his brother drowned the summer before. Each one came with a lantern, some old, some new. Here's the thing. Now that Eli has discovered this secret, he's willing to share it with others. He doesn't ask them to come, but he doesn't stop them either. He lets them come to the lake and find their own stories. Here's a great example of foreshadowing. Remember Mara, the baker's daughter, who had always wandered too far from the village, and who had stopped speaking after his brother drowned the summer before. Well, I bet those are going to be the stories that their lanterns will help them to explore. Each one found something waiting in the mist. The village didn't question. They began to leave lanterns on doorsteps, on windowsills, at graves, and the lake island for so many years began to shine again when it rained. When it rained. This is such a good line. It shows that the village has taken ownership of this tradition. They understand what the lake needs from them. They know that they need to leave lanterns on doorsteps, on windowsills, at graves, and they do it without questioning why. It's just something they do because they understand the value of the stories. Eli, now older in spirit than in years, stayed by the water's edge. He didn't speak much, but his eyes carried stories. When someone arrived with a lantern, he would simply nod and point to the stone. The keeper, they said, had passed on, and a new one had been chosen not because he was asked, but because he had listened. The keeper, they said, had passed on. I love that phrase. It implies that the ability to listen has been transferred to him, and I also love the idea that he wasn't chosen because he asked to be chosen, but because he had listened. That's the story. That's the message. Listening is what unlocks the mystery. It's what allows him to connect with the stories. It's what allows him to pass on the stories. Okay, so that's the story. Now let's take a moment to consider the style. What kind of language does the author use? Well, firstly, she uses lots of sensory details. This really brings the scene to life. You can see the colors. You can hear the rain. You can feel the heat of the fire. And then secondly, she uses lots of similes. Everything is compared to something else. This helps the reader to visualize what's happening. Finally, she uses figurative language. For example, a small flame drifting toward him across the lake. This isn't actually a flame. It's a metaphor. It's a way of describing a memory that's coming to him. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. Until next time. So I don't normally do this, but I have 2 announcements. The second one is definitely more exciting. But let me start with the first, because I owe you an explanation. Now, if you're watching this video, you already know that I love writing horror. Psychological horror in particular. What you may not know is that I also love reading psychological horror. There are certain authors whose work I could read over and over again, which is why I am thrilled to announce that I will be doing author recommendations and even interviews on a brand new podcast called Between the Covers. Each episode will dive deep into the works of a different author, exploring not just their most famous books, but lesser-known gems as well. And as a special treat, I'll be reaching out to some of these authors to see if they'll join me for an interview. This podcast is my love letter to readers everywhere, and to the authors who create worlds so vivid that we can get lost in them. My co-host has been a dear friend since middle school, and she shares my passion for all things dark and twisty. So if you're ready to discover your next favorite book and explore the minds behind them, make sure to check out Between the Covers. You can find us on various platforms or through the link in the description below. New episodes premiere every Monday. And now for the exciting part. As many of you know, I am obsessed with all things eerie and macabre, especially when it comes to old school aesthetics. And I have poured that passion into creating a shop filled with items that I myself would love to find in a dusty antique store. Everything in my shop is inspired by vintage occult and esoteric finds. We've got apothecary bottles filled with colorful potion-esque bath salts, spell books bound in faux leather, vintage-style keychains, and even crystal kits complete with velvet drawstring bags. Whether you're looking to add a touch of whimsy to your everyday life, or searching for the perfect gift for a fellow lover of the strange and unusual, I think you'll find something special at my shop. So if you're intrigued, head over to our website and use code STORYTELLER for 15% off your first order. I can't wait to share my love of all things eerie with you. But now let's get back to our story. The storm that came that night was not gentle. It roared through the valley with the voice of something ancient and long buried. Trees bent like prayer flags in the wind, the sky split open with white veins of lightning, and the lake, usually calm, even in storm, trembled. As if remembering something it had tried to forget, Eli stood under the twisted pine by the stone, cloak wrapped tight, the rain blurring his face. His lantern was anchored to the earth, its flame barely visible in the tempest. Then he saw her, a girl no more than 12, stumbling down the forest path. Her arms cradled something wrapped in cloth, something heavy. Mud streaked her dress, and her shoes were soaked through, but her eyes, they burned like flint in the rain. She reached him, panting, and unwrapped her bundle. It was a lantern, shattered. One side of the glass was cracked open, the wick soaked, and the oil leaked out. Only fragments remained of the metal frame, twisted as if crushed beneath grief. "I found it in the attic," she said. "It was my brother's." Eli said nothing. He knelt by the stone and cleared space beside his own lantern. The girl hesitated, unsure. "It's broken," she whispered. "It won't light." Eli looked at her. "Let it rest here. The lake doesn't forget." The girl placed the broken lantern gently in the moss. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the rain stopped. Just like that. No slow fading, no soft retreat, just silence. The mist thickened like breath on glass, and from the far side of the lake, a single flame appeared. Not drifting, not floating, rising. It emerged from beneath the surface, an impossible thing, a glowing flame rising from the deep, like a memory swimming toward the surface of a dream. The girl gasped. The light moved across the lake, slowly, steadily, rippling silver behind it. The storm clouds above parted just enough for a shaft of moonlight to fall across the water, and there they saw it. A boy, maybe 15, standing barefoot on the lake, as if it was stone. His hair was soaked and wild, his clothes loose and in his hands he held the flame, the same shade of gold as the broken lantern now lying quiet on the moss. The girl stepped forward. "Luca," she whispered. The boy on the lake didn't speak, but he smiled, the kind of smile that belonged to 1,000 evenings playing by the lakeside. Two shared laughter, two promises whispered beneath willow trees, to childhood. Before it ended too soon, the flame in his hands lifted into the air, drifted toward the broken lantern, and without a sound, it entered it. The shards reassembled. The cracks faded. The wick rewove itself like a spider's silk, and the glass shone clean. A new flame kindled within, soft, golden, and whole. The boy on the lake stepped backward into the mist. His shape blurred, then vanished entirely, just another reflection lost in the ripples. The girl dropped to her knees, tears mixing with the last of the rain. "Thank you," she whispered. Not to Eli, not to the sky, but to the space between all the places memory lives. Eli watched in silence. The flame inside the once broken lantern now flickered with a rhythm unmistakable, warm, steady, alive. From that night forward, stories spread, not just of lanterns that glowed when it rained, but of broken ones that healed, of lost ones that returned, of lights that carried voices. People came not only with remembrance, but with grief. Lanterns that had shattered in sorrow, ones long hidden in closets, ones handed down but never lit. And still, the lake received them all. Eli never asked for their names. He only listened and watched and kept the flames company. One night, alone again by the stone, Eli looked down at his own lantern, the one he had carried when he first arrived. Years ago now. It was no longer just golden. Inside, he saw hues from every light he had tended. The violet memory of a laughing girl, the blue sorrow of a widow's flame, the green hope of a boy who had once stopped speaking, and at the very center, a soft silver thread. Not a light he had seen before, not a memory he recognized, but a promise that when he was gone, someone else would come, and the lanterns would still burn. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please consider leaving a like and a comment. And if you haven't already subscribed, I hope you'll do so today. Until next time, remember, the darkest hour is just before the flames begin to glow. This is the 14th episode of a series called Archive 81. This episode is titled Before Eli, Before the Keeper, before even the village had a name, or the trail was worn beneath the boots of wanderers. There was the lake, and there was the rain. The old ones didn't speak of how it began. Not clearly. The story lived only in fragments, half whispers from heartside elders, carved symbols beneath the stone, and a name etched faintly into the underside of the first lantern. No one had ever spoken it aloud until now. The night was windless, strange. The lake lay like glass, undisturbed. Even the mist stood still. Eli had returned again, not with a lantern, but with a question he couldn't shake. It had haunted him since the night the broken light was made whole again. Who lit the very first flame? He sat beside the keeper's stone, fingers tracing the weather-worn writ. The lantern beside him glowed softly, its colors now deeper than ever, a weaving of stories, like threads in a long tapestry. And then he heard it, a voice, not a whisper, not a sound, but a presence that spoke in the hush between heartbeats. If you would find her, you must walk backward through time. The mist curled at his feet. The flame in his lantern stretched toward the lake, and without thinking, Eli stepped into the boat. He didn't row. The water pulled him backward, not just across the lake, but through something else, through memory, through silence, through years folded like paper cranes in the dark. Trees on the shore unwound their growth, the stars reversed their arc, and the boat, old and cracked, slowly became young, again paint fresh, wood clean, until it stopped. And the lake was no longer quiet. And the rest, well, that's for me to know, and for you to find out. But here's a hint. Sometimes the past isn't as buried as we think. It's right under our noses, just like this episode, which might seem like a detour, a moment of calm before the storm. But it's really laying the groundwork for everything that's to come. You see, every choice has a consequence. Every action has a reaction, and those ripples extend far beyond the present. They echo into the past and sometimes resurface in the most unexpected ways. When we first met Elias, he was a man on a mission, driven by a need for answers, a need to understand the darkness that threatened to consume him. His journey led him to the Whispering Lake, a place steeped in mystery and myth. There he encountered the Keeper, a guardian of sorts, bound to the lake by an ancient pact. Together they faced trials that tested not only their courage and resilience, but also the very core of their beings. Eli discovered that he wasn't just a simple woodsman, but a vessel of immense power, a conduit between the realms of shadow and light. His connection to the lake, to the Keeper, and to a being of pure darkness named Cal were intricately woven into the fabric of the lake's existence. But amidst the battles and revelations, there were moments of tranquility. Moments like this one, where the rain had ceased its relentless drumming, and the lake lay still like a mirror, reflecting the somber sky. In these moments, the weight of the past pressed heavily upon Eli's shoulders. He grappled with the legacy of the Whisperers, the Keepers of the Flame, and the burden of protecting this world from the encroaching darkness. Yet even in the depths of his despair, there was a flicker of hope, a guiding light that urged him forward, urging him to keep the flame alive. The lantern in his possession wasn't just a source of illumination. It was a beacon, a symbol of the resistance against the consuming darkness. Its gentle glow casting dancing shadows that played across Eli's face, etching lines of worry, determination, and above all, longing for answers, longing for guidance, longing for a way to navigate the treacherous waters that lay ahead. And then came the whispers. Not from the wind, but from the depths of the lake itself. Fragments of memories, echoes of stories, long past, all pointing towards a single name. A name that held the key to unraveling the mysteries of the Whispering Lake. The name Erelon, spoken at last, after countless years of silence. It was a pivotal moment, a turning point in Eli's journey. With each syllable he uttered, the veil between the past and the present thinned, allowing glimpses of a forgotten history. The name resonated with an otherworldly music, echoing the rhythm of the lake in the heartbeat of the earth itself, as if the very essence of the Whispering Lake was rejoicing at its own tale, being told once more. As the night deepened, the presence beside him grew stronger, no longer a mere whisper in the wind, but a tangible force. It was the embodiment of the Whispering Lake itself, awakened by the uttering of its long-forgotten name. In response to Eli's heartfelt plea for understanding, the lake bestowed upon him a vision, a journey through time, to witness the birth of the Whispering Lake and the origins of the flame that had become his burden and his strength. Guided by an unseen hand, Eli found himself transported back in time, the familiar shore of the Whispering Lake becoming a distant memory. The trees around him changed, their silent growth a testament to the passage of years. Stars shifted in the night sky, tracing a path backward towards the dawn of creation. With each step, Eli not only moved through time, but through the very essence of the lake's history. In doing so, he became a part of the story he was meant to protect, a protector of memories, and a guardian of legacies. The air grew colder, carrying the scent of rain and the faintest echo of laughter. The sky cleared, revealing a canvas of stars more vivid than Eli had ever seen. The boat, once his vessel of passage, now felt like a relic of a bygone era. Its wood smooth and worn, its paint faded by countless seasons. It was a tangible link to the past, a reminder of the journey he had undertaken to reach this moment. And as the mist swirled around his feet, coiling like spectral serpents, Eli realized he wasn't just reliving history, it was becoming part of it. The Whispering Lake had shown him not just its birth, but its purpose, its connection to the very fabric of existence. And in understanding this, Eli's resolve only grew stronger. The weight of his lineage, the responsibility of his bloodline surged through him, driving him to protect, preserve, and carry on the legacy of the Whisperers. The rain began anew, not as a torrent, but as a gentle patter on the ancient leaves. The sky mirrored the depths of his soul, somber yet hopeful, and in the melody of falling water, Eli heard the echo of his ancestors. Their voices carried on the wind, their spirits entwined with the Whispering Lake forever. As the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, painting the eastern sky in hues of rose and gold, Eli knew his journey was far from over. The whispers of the past had woven themselves into the tapestry of his present, and his future would be forever intertwined with that of the Whispering Lake. Armed with the knowledge gleaned from his journey through time, Eli prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The Whispers had shown him the strength born of unity, the power of resilience, and the unwavering spirit of those who had come before him. With the name Aluin on his lips, and the spirit of the lake coursing through his veins, Eli stepped back into the boat. The water rippled, not in response to his touch, but as if anticipating his return. The rain intensified, blurring the edges of his vision, but it wasn't unpleasant. In fact, it felt cleansing, as though the very essence of the lake was washing away the doubts and fears that had clouded his path. As the boat glided back across the lake, the mists swirling around him like protective spirits, Eli knew he wasn't merely returning to the present, he was returning transformed. The Whispering Lake had revealed its secrets, but it had also bestowed upon him a profound sense of purpose. The flame he carried within him burned brighter, steadier, fueled by the legacy of generations past. With each stroke of the oars, Eli drew closer not just to the present, but to his true self, to the embodiment of the Whisperer's lineage. The shore emerged from the mist, the trees standing like silent sentinels, marking the passage of time. And as the boat touched down on the familiar bank, Eli stepped out, his feet firm on the ground, ready to face the trials that lay ahead. The Whispering Lake receded into the background, its echoes fading into the rustling leaves, but its presence remained, woven into the fabric of Eli's being. He looked up at the sky, the stars no longer distant, but companions on his journey. He closed his eyes, feeling the wind on his face, carrying the scent of rain and the promise of renewal. The whispers of the past were now a part of his strength, guiding him towards a future where the flame of remembrance burned eternal. Every culture has a story about a boy who doesn't belong, a boy who isn't quite human. Sometimes they call him the lost boy, sometimes the wild boy. Sometimes they don't bother with names. They just point and say, "Beware." This is the story of one such boy. It happened in a village at the edge of a forest, so deep and dark it seemed to drink the sunlight most days. The only way to tell it was there was by the way the wind shifted. The villagers knew better than to cross its border. Some things aren't meant to be found. They'd say, it's safer to keep some doors closed. One year, the rains came differently, not with sorrow, but with rhythm, like a drumbeat carried on clouds, like a lullaby that had finally remembered its melody. And with it came a boy, not to light a lantern, not to mourn, not even to remember. He came because he had seen it in a dream, in the reflection of a train window, in the soft flicker of a candle that refused to go out even when he blew. He came because something whispered, not all lights are meant to stay. His name was Toma. He was small for his age, quiet even by village standards, and always watching the sky as if it might tell him what his mouth could not. No one had ever seen him cry, but they had seen him build kites from torn cloth and bone-dry reeds, send them flying with strings made from his own hair. He arrived at the lake with a bundle wrapped in oilskin, a lantern unlike any the villagers had seen, tall, narrow, wrapped in wire. It pulsed faintly not with fire, but with something like breath. Toma didn't kneel by the stone. He didn't wait for Lena. He walked to the water's edge and began to speak. "I didn't lose anyone," he said. The lake was still. The mist began to gather. "I'm not here to ask for light." The flame from Lena's keeper lantern now kept high on a branch above Toma looked up at the sky. The first raindrops began to fall. "I came to return it." The lake stirred. The mist pulled away like curtains from a stage. Lena, watching from behind the trees, felt something in her chest, loosened something she hadn't realized she'd held too tightly. She stepped forward, but stopped. Toma had placed his lantern in the water. It didn't float, it sank, and as it did, 100 tiny lights burst from it like sparks from an unseen forge, some darting upward into the sky, some diving deeper into the lake, some spinning gently toward the forest. Not flames, not ghosts, memories no longer tethered. You see, this wasn't just any boy. This was no ordinary child. This was someone who shouldn't have been born, someone who shouldn't have survived. His mother had been a weaver, a maker of shadows. Her craft was both revered and feared, for she wove the stories of the dead into tapestries, so real you could reach out and touch their sorrow or pull their joy close like a blanket. Her looms were hung in the center of the village, her walls adorned with scenes from lives well lived and lost. One day, though, she wove a new story, a story that shouldn't have been told, a story that shouldn't have come alive. In her haste, she'd woven in memories not yet made, futures that weren't meant to unfold. The moment the threads took shape, the world rippled. Birds fell from the sky. Fish flopped on the shore. The old ways faltered. The familiar turned strange. For a moment, the lines between past, present, and future blurred, leaving behind a gaping hole where order once stood. Fearful, she tried to unravel her mistake, but it was too late. The damage was done. The boy remained. For years, she shielded him, hid him away, hoping time would soften the world and make it safe for him. But time did not soften the world. It hardened it, turning whispers into shouts, patience into intolerance. When her loom fell silent, and the stories of others filled the village square, she knew it was time to let him go. So she wove a final tapestry, one last story of courage and hope, and sent him into the world with a piece of it wrapped around him like armor. When Toma left, his mother felt the world right itself. The balance returned. But she also felt something else, a piece of her own story unravel. Soon after, her hands grew stiff, her eyes dimmed, the threads of her life growing thin. Before she passed, she wove a final gift for Toma, a cloak woven from moonlight and mist, designed to keep him hidden until he found his way back home. Then she died, and her looms fell silent. For Toma wandered the land for many years, meeting people who couldn't look him in the eye, touching grass that withered beneath him, hearing birds that flew away at his approach. He saw joy and sorrow, kindness and fear, all emotions that tugged at him, pulling him closer, wanting to be understood, wanting to understand. But he couldn't stay. The more he learned, the more the world changed. The more he became a stranger in a land that was never his own. Then one night, guided by the sliver of a new moon, he found himself at the edge of the dark wood, a place he'd never been allowed to go. He slipped inside, following a deer with fur the color of moonlight. The deeper he went, the quieter it became. Not just the sounds of the world, but the sounds within him, too. The questions, the confusion, the loneliness. As the trees thinned, he heard the rush of water, then saw it. A lake nestled between the hills, mist rising from its surface, like memories taking flight. He recognized it from his dreams, from the flickering lamplight, from the depths of his own being. And beside the lake sat a girl, unlike any he'd seen before. Her hair the color of twilight, her eyes like pools of starlight. She was weaving, not with threads or cloth, but with light, creating patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid silver. Toma approached, drawn by an unseen hand, and she looked up, startled, then smiled. A sound like wind chimes tinkling in the breeze. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice like the chime of a distant temple. "I am Toma," he answered, surprised by the strength in his own voice. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I know who you are," she said. "You've come home." And indeed, he had come home. For this was no ordinary girl. This was Lena, the keeper of lost things, the weaver of memories. And this was the place where stories went, when they had no more threads to follow, where dreams took shape, before becoming memories, where the echoes of the past found solace in the present, and where the whispers of the future hoped to find purchase in the now. Here, Toma could be himself without fear of changing the world, without fear of the world changing him. Here, his silence was a comfort, not a burden. His strangeness, a wonder, not a curse. Here, he could learn the old ways, the ways of listening to the world, of feeling its heartbeat, of understanding its language. He could help Lena mend broken memories, guide lost dreams, and give voice to the unheard. So Toma stayed. He learned the stories of those who came before, of those whose lives flickered and faded like dying embers. And as the seasons turned, he began to weave his own story into the fabric of the lake. A story of courage and resilience, of acceptance and belonging. A story that whispered, not all lights are meant to stay. For some, staying means dimming their flame, to blend in, to be accepted, to not stand out. But Toma wasn't meant to blend in. He was meant to shine. His light, though different, was no less valuable. It was just dimmer because he was holding it back. Years passed. Decades came and went. Toma aged, but his spirit remained young, his eyes clear, his purpose strong. He became known as the Shepherd of Lights, guiding those who stumbled in the darkness, helping them find their way back to the light. And Lena, watching him from the edge of her vision, felt something stir within her. A melody, long forgotten, a rhythm she thought had ceased to exist, a lullaby that had finally remembered its song. If you're new here, welcome. This is a place where magic happens. And today I'm so excited because I get to share an excerpt from an upcoming book. This story is part of a larger world, and while it can be enjoyed as a standalone, if you've already fallen in love with other stories in this world, rest assured, this one will feel right at home. So grab a hot drink, settle in, and get ready to be swept away. They say the lake only speaks when it rains. But Lena had begun to hear it even in silence. It was a hush that lived beneath her ribs, a tremor like birds lifting in the dark, a voice not made of words, but of presence, weightless and patient. And then one afternoon, when the wind curled strangely through the branches and the sky wore the color of pewter, the voice inside her said only, "Come." Lena followed the call to the lake's edge. There was no storm, no lantern on the stone. Just stillness. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. She took off her cloak, letting it fall like a discarded skin. And then, barefoot now, she stepped in. The water touched her toes, not cold, not warm. Just there, like memory. And without fear, she stepped in. The surface didn't ripple. Instead, the water parted beneath her foot like mist, made solid, and a path revealed itself narrow, ancient, winding forward into the middle of the lake. She walked. With each step, echoes rose beneath her, the laughter of children long gone, lullabies lost to winter, whispers of names once forgotten and now returning like birds in spring. The sky above dimmed, and the lake's surface mirrored not clouds, but stars, as if night had fallen only in this one place. At the very center of the lake stood a circle of stones, half submerged, covered in lichen, etched with the same symbols Lena had once traced with her fingers on the keeper's stone. Inside the circle, hovering inches above the water, was a flame. Silver, silent, alive, not held by glass, not contained by metal, free. Lena stepped into the circle, and the wind vanished. No rustle, no ripple, no heartbeat, only flame. And her. It tilted gently toward her, not in hunger, not in command, in offering. And she understood. It was not just a light for remembrance. It was a light for becoming. She reached forward, and as her fingers neared it, the flame surged not in heat, but in color: gold, violet, green, blue, rose, white, and silver. Always silver. Like the thread of a river pulled taut by time. It entered her palm. No pain, only a warmth. It knew a name before she was born. And in that moment, Lena saw it all. The first stone, laid by Elwyn's hand, Eli's silence and his long watch, the flame traveling through centuries like breath passed from mouth to mouth, every keeper, every child, every broken lantern that had once believed it would never glow again. And she heard a whisper not from outside, but from the flame now cradled inside her. You are not the last. The lake shifted, the path dissolved, and Lena stood once more at the edge. No one had seen her walk. No one had called her back. But the moment she turned, she knew. She no longer needed to guard the flame. She was the flame. And wherever she walked, it would follow. That night, for the first time in decades, lanterns bloomed, not just by the lake, but all through the village, hung from trees, set in windows, floated on streams, and in every one, a glimmer of silver. No one asked where the light had come from. They simply knelt beside it and let it speak. This is the third story in a series set in a world woven from folklore and myth. We follow characters from various cultures and fairy tales as they attend a special school where they learn to understand and control their magical abilities. The first two books have been out for a few years now and have become modern classics. If you haven't met them yet, I highly recommend checking them out. This third book has been years in the making, and though the world is familiar, it's also changed in some important ways. So if you're looking for something comforting and nostalgic, I hope these pages might bring you just that. I know you don't need reminding, but I'll say it anyway. Please don't feed the trolls. You've probably noticed some really horrible people lurking in the comment sections of my videos. I do my best to keep an eye on things, but please don't engage with spammers or racists or people trying to spread misinformation. Don't encourage them. Don't play their games. If you see anything you think might violate community guidelines, use the flag feature. And if you want to support my channel's community guidelines, you can become a member. Being a member lets you help me curate this community by voting on which comments get deleted. So if you want to spend less time moderating and more time creating, consider signing up. It's easy to get caught up in the darkness, to focus on the monsters under our beds or in our closets. But maybe the greatest monster of all is the one we make in our own minds. Fear can convince us that we are undeserving of happiness, that we are not worthy of love. It can tell us that we are better off alone. But those fears are lies, and we have the power to overcome them. When we choose kindness over fear, we create a ripple effect. When we treat others with warmth and understanding, they are more likely to do the same for us. And this goes beyond our closest friends and family. By being genuinely nice to strangers, you may just change the course of someone's life. And when they pass on your kindness to others, the cycle continues. Remember, it's not what we have, but who we are that truly matters. Generosity and compassion are renewable resources. They grow when shared and diminish when hoarded. And while it may be tempting to retreat into ourselves, to protect what we have, we'll find that true abundance comes from giving. My hope is that by exploring these ideas in a safe space, we can begin to challenge our negative thoughts and beliefs. I believe that if we are willing to listen to the voices of reason and empathy, they will carry us through. So let's face our fears together and emerge stronger and kinder than ever before. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you found this story helpful or enjoyable, please consider supporting me. Your support helps me continue sharing these stories with the world. Thanks for listening and take care. Every culture has a story about a boy who doesn't belong, a boy who isn't quite human. Sometimes they call him the lost boy, sometimes the wild boy. Sometimes they don't bother with names. They just point and say, beware. This is the story of one such boy. It happened in a village at the edge of a forest, so deep and dark it seemed to drink the sunlight most days. The only way to tell it was there was by the way the wind shifted. The villagers knew better than to cross its border. Some things aren't meant to be found. They'd say, it's safer to keep some doors closed. One year, the rains came differently, not with sorrow, but with rhythm, like a drumbeat carried on clouds, like a lullaby that had finally remembered its melody. And with it came a boy, not to light a lantern, not to mourn, not even to remember. He came because he had seen it in a dream, in the reflection of a train window, in the soft flicker of a candle that refused to go out even when he blew. He came because something whispered, "Not all lights are meant to stay." His name was Toma. He was small for his age, quiet, even by village standards, and always watching the sky as if it might tell him what his mouth could not. No one had ever seen him cry, but they had seen him build kites from torn cloth and bone-dry reeds, send them flying with strings made from his own hair. He arrived at the lake with a bundle wrapped in oilskin, a lantern unlike any the villagers had seen, tall, narrow, wrapped in wire. It pulsed faintly, not with fire, but with something like breath. Toma didn't kneel by the stone. He didn't wait for Lena. He walked to the water's edge and began to speak. "I didn't lose anyone," he said. The lake was still. The mist began to gather. "I'm not here to ask for light." The flame from Lena's keeper lantern now kept high on a branch above the Toma looked up at the sky. The first raindrops began to fall. "I came to return it." The lake stirred. The mist pulled away like curtains from a stage. Lena, watching from behind the trees, felt something in her chest, loosened something she hadn't realized she'd held too tightly. She stepped forward, but stopped. Toma had placed his lantern in the water. It didn't float, it sank, and as it did, 100 tiny lights burst from it like sparks from an unseen forge, some darting upward into the sky, some diving deeper into the lake, some spinning gently toward the forest. Not flames, not ghosts, memories no longer tethered. You see, this wasn't just any boy. This was no ordinary child. This was someone who shouldn't have been born, someone who shouldn't have survived. His mother had been a weaver, a maker of shadows. Her craft was both revered and feared, for she wove the stories of the dead into tapestries, so real you could reach out and touch their sorrow or pull their joy close like a blanket. Her looms were hung in the center of the village, her walls adorned with scenes from lives well lived and lost. One day, though, she wove a new story, a story that shouldn't have been told, a story that shouldn't have come alive. In her haste, she'd woven in memories not yet made, futures that weren't meant to unfold. The moment the threads took shape, the world rippled. Birds fell from the sky. Fish flopped on the shore. The old ways faltered. The familiar turned strange. For a moment, the lines between past, present, and future blurred, leaving behind a gaping hole where order once stood. Fearful, she tried to unravel her mistake, but it was too late. The damage was done. The boy remained. For years, she shielded him, hid him away, hoping time would soften the world and make it safe for him. But time did not soften the world. It hardened it, turning whispers into shouts, patience into intolerance. When her loom fell silent, and the stories of others filled the village square, she knew it was time to let him go. So she wove a final tapestry, one last story of courage and hope, and sent him into the world with a piece of it wrapped around him like armor. When Toma left, his mother felt the world right itself. The balance returned. But she also felt something else, a piece of her own story unravel. Soon after, her hands grew stiff, her eyes dimmed, the threads of her life growing thin. Before she passed, she wove a final gift for Toma, a cloak woven from moonlight and mist, designed to keep him hidden until he found his way back home. Then she died, and her looms fell silent. For Toma wandered the land for many years, meeting people who couldn't look him in the eye, touching grass that withered beneath him, hearing birds that flew away at his approach. He saw joy and sorrow, kindness and fear, all emotions that tugged at him, pulling him closer, wanting to be understood, wanting to understand. But he couldn't stay. The more he learned, the more the world changed. The more he became a stranger in a land that was never his own. Then one night, guided by the sliver of a new moon, he found himself at the edge of the dark wood, a place he'd never been allowed to go. He slipped inside, following a deer with fur the color of moonlight. The deeper he went, the quieter it became. Not just the sounds of the world, but the sounds within him, too. The questions, the confusion, the loneliness. As the trees thinned, he heard the rush of water, then saw it. A lake nestled between the hills, mist rising from its surface, like memories taking flight. He recognized it from his dreams, from the flickering lamplight, from the depths of his own being. And beside the lake sat a girl, unlike any he'd seen before. Her hair the color of twilight, her eyes like pools of starlight. She was weaving, not with threads or cloth, but with light, creating patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid silver. Toma approached, drawn by an unseen hand, and she looked up, startled, then smiled. A sound like wind, chimes tinkling in the breeze. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice like the chime of a distant temple. "I am Toma," he answered, surprised by the strength in his own voice. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I know who you are," she said. "You've come home." And indeed, he had come home. For this was no ordinary girl. This was Lena, the keeper of lost things, the weaver of memories. And this was the place where stories went, when they had no more threads to follow, where dreams took shape, before becoming memories, where the echoes of the past found solace in the present, and where the whispers of the future hoped to find purchase in the now. Here, Toma could be himself without fear of changing the world, without fear of the world changing him. Here, his silence was a comfort, not a burden. His strangeness, a wonder, not a curse. Here, he could learn the old ways, the ways of listening to the world, of feeling its heartbeat, of understanding its language. He could help Lena mend broken memories, guide lost dreams, and give voice to the unheard. So Toma stayed. He learned the stories of those who came before, of those whose lives flickered and faded like dying embers. And as the seasons turned, he began to weave his own story into the fabric of the lake. A story of courage and resilience, of acceptance and belonging. A story that whispered, not all lights are meant to stay. For some, staying means dimming their flame, to blend in, to be accepted, to not stand out. But Toma wasn't meant to blend in. He was meant to shine. His light, though different, was no less valuable. It was just dimmer because he was holding it back. Years passed. Decades came and went. Toma aged, but his spirit remained young, his eyes clear, his purpose strong. He became known as the Shepherd of Lights, guiding those who stumbled in the darkness, helping them find their way back to the light. And Lena, watching him from the edge of her vision, felt something stir within her. A melody, long forgotten, a rhythm she thought had ceased to exist, a lullaby that had finally remembered its song. If you want to hear more stories about folklore, mythology, and legends from around the world, stay tuned. They say a story is a mirror, and in the mirror, you only see what you bring to it. In the 19th century, an author wrote down the folk tales he'd heard growing up in Finland. The oldest one so old its edges were lost to time, spoke of a young man who lived at the edge of the world. We'll call him Toma. He knew his duty was to guard a lake that every night shimmered silver under the stars. For countless years, he and those before him had kept watch, tending fires, making sure no shadows dared creep too close. The lake was restless. Its moods could turn on a whisper, summoning storms or shrouding the land in mists. So thick men lost their way. It was Toma's job to calm it, to send the nightmares back to the dark with his own light. He stood in the shallows now, letting the rain soak through his shirt, his hair clinging to his brow. The silver mist swirled around him once, then spiraled away, lifting into the clouds like breath rising into a sky, finally ready to listen. Beside him, Lena walked her steps, soft on the whetstone. "Do you know what you did?" she asked. Toma didn't look at her. "I let it go." He watched the mist unravel above them, stretching and thinning until the darkness of the mountains was clear against the darkening sky. It had been 6 days since the last lantern had fallen. 6 days of heavy skies and the echo of unspoken words. Now the lake breathed freely again. A fat frog leaped from rock to rock, croaking its thanks, and the cattails bowed their heads in quiet gratitude. The rain stopped. Lena stepped closer. "I thought we'd agreed." Her voice caught on a sob. Toma turned then, letting the pain in his eyes spill out onto his face. "It had to be this way. Don't you see? She couldn't stay here." Lena wanted to argue, to plead for just one more chance. But Toma shook his head slowly, the movement so full of sadness it stole her breath. His hands, usually strong and sure, trembled as he pushed a lock of hair behind her ear. "She'll be better off where she's going." With a final squeeze of his hand, Toma walked away, leaving Lena in the damp grass. He didn't look back even once as night fell. The lake glowed faintly, the lanterns on the branches dimming one by one, until every last ember faded to gray. The night was dark. For the first time in many generations, the villagers were not afraid. Instead, they slept deeply, dreaming dreams undisturbed by bog beasts or witches in the wood. The next day, children arrived as they always did, bringing their lanterns with them. They made their way to the stone, but instead of placing their lanterns, they held them close and climbed the nearest tree. Then one by one, they hung their lights from roots, or buried them beneath bluebells, or tucked them into the hollows of ancient trees. When all the lanterns were gone, the children ran through the woods, calling to each other, laughing as the wind snatched at their braids and the sunlight dappled their faces. They didn't ask to keep the lights anymore. They asked where they might send them, and the rain, gentle and knowing, fell like music across the moss. From that season forward, a new tradition began. Every year, when the first summer storm painted the lake in silver, the children would gather, but not to mourn, to release kites with lanterns, boats with open sides, paper sacks with handles like reins. Even pebbles were tossed with such force they skimmed across the surface, riding the waves until the flames sputtered out, leaving only shining trails in their wake. And each time, as if the lake itself nodded in approval, a flock of lights would rise, flickering like fireflies, carried by wind, disappearing over the hills and beyond. Some said they reached cities, some said they became stars. Lena found Toma 2 days later, tracing paths in the wet sand. When he looked up, his face was streaked with dirt, his shirt torn, but his eyes, they shone like the lake after a storm. She dropped to her knees beside him, wanting to pour out all the questions that clawed at her throat. "Why?" he heard himself say. Toma took her hand, letting her rough palm smooth over his knuckles. "Because it had to be this way. Don't you understand? When the creatures came, I could only offer her the lake. It was our duty. It's my duty. I had to do it." His voice cracked, and he squeezed her hand tighter. "You don't understand what it's like," he whispered, "to live at the end of the world, to be the last hope for everyone, to be responsible for all of it." Lena nodded, tears pricking at her eyes, blurring the dark shape of the mountain against the gray sky. "But you're not alone. We are here." Toma looked away then, unable to meet her gaze. He wasn't alone, not really. But what good did that do? What good had it done? Each time the villagers gathered, their fear grew, casting dark shadows over the lake, hardening his resolve. Each time he felt the weight of his responsibility press down on him, crushing the laughter out of his lungs, and turning his stomach to lead. And every night he tended the fires, pushing away the creeping dark, sending the nightmares back with his own light, hoping, praying he'd wake before the dawn. Except the night she'd come, he hadn't. He'd woken just as the mist swallowed the mountains, just as the nightmares breached the shore, and he'd sent her away. He hadn't meant to. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. When she was little, she'd played at the edge of the village, chasing butterflies and picking wildflowers. He'd watched her then from afar, hidden in the reeds, wondering if he could ever tell her, wondering if he should. Then the shadows came. One night, the mist rolled in early, coiling like a hungry snake, and slithering towards the sleeping village. He'd known she wouldn't be safe, so he'd raced to her, scooping her into his arms and running for the highest ground. There, cradling her against the rocks, he'd poured his magic into her. wrapping her in protective mists, while the nightmares lashed out, tearing at the veil of his power. And when dawn finally broke, she'd been asleep, untouched. He'd stayed awake for 2 days, watching, waiting. When she woke and smiled at him, he'd known he could never send her away. He couldn't bear it. So he'd told her stories. Stories of a world beyond the hills, beyond the lake, beyond the endless sky. And she'd listened, wide-eyed, clutching his hand and asking questions that warmed him more than the midday sun. By the time the third night fell and the moon was heavy in the sky, he'd promised her the whole world. And how could he break that promise? As he sat there watching the children, Toma realized there was only one way. When the others had left, he went back to the shore, kneeling beside the stone. 6 lanterns lay there, silent witnesses to the burden he'd carried. He picked one up, tracing the grooves in its side, remembering the hopes, the dreams, the laughter he'd wrapped inside. Then, holding it tight, he closed his eyes and whispered a prayer to the wind, asking forgiveness, offering his pain. And as the last word died on his lips, he flung the lantern into the silver lake. A spark ignited, then bloomed, chasing away the lingering dark. The boat drifted away, becoming one with the mist, until only a faint glow marked its path. One by one, he released the rest, watching them go. And with each splash of water, a memory surfaced, pulling him deeper, until he was laughing and crying and screaming as the light consumed him. A while later, Lena found the keeper, sitting alone at the edge of the woods. Beside him lay a folded kite, its string trailing into the water. When she asked what it meant, he only gestured to the fading sky, where a new constellation glittered like captured fireflies. As for Toma, he left without goodbye. If this piece of writing looks familiar, it's because it comes from one of my favorite picture books, The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. And while we wait for the movie adaptation to come out, I've got a treat for you. Today's prompt comes to us from Kelly herself and asks us to write a scene about 2 characters who do you want to save the world. Characters can have a hard time wanting things, whether it is a nice sweater or the love of a family member or the destruction of their sworn enemy. So let's talk about how to make characters who don't want something wanted anyway. We're going to look at a few ways writers handle this situation. In our example, we meet 2 characters, Lena and Nemi, and learn that there is a legend in their culture about a girl who drank the moon and brought the nighttime hours into balance. It seems that the girl is long gone, but every year, the lake where she drank the moon calls to young girls to carry it. Since no one has come to answer the call in a very long time, the night has become out of balance. It's too dark. People are afraid to leave their homes. The land is dying. When the lake calls for help, Nemi is the only one who hears it. She tells her friend Lena about it, but Lena doesn't believe her. Every year the lake calls, and every year no one answers. So what makes this year any different? Also, even if she could help, which she can't, why would she want to? Life is good now, and saving the world sounds like a lot of work. But here's the thing. Sometimes we make characters not want something because we want to protect them from pain. They might think that what they want isn't actually good for them. In this case, Lena thinks saving the world is dangerous and would rather stay safe than risk it all. Or they may be so jaded that they don't believe anything good can happen anymore. If every year the lake calls and every year no one answers, well, maybe it's best just to stop believing. Or they might not understand why they should care. Maybe it's too far removed from their own life. How does saving the world make Lena's life better? It doesn't seem fair, so she refuses. So what happens next? Well, that depends on your character. Does Nemi try to convince Lena to come with her? Does she go alone? Does she pretend? The whole thing never happened. What's interesting about this particular story is that neither option is right or wrong. There's no clear hero or villain. Both girls have reasons for their choices, and both are understandable. As writers, it is up to us to decide how much sense it makes for a character to do what they're redoing. But the best characters are usually those who aren't trying to be good or bad, just trying to get by. Then we, the readers, get to decide whether we agree with their choices. And this story does a great job of giving us all the information we need to figure out how we feel about each character. decision. We know that Nemi is worried about the state of the world. Otherwise, she wouldn't hear the call. But we also know she understands the danger of answering it. Otherwise, she wouldn't ask Lena to come with her. So she's trying to do something about it, but she also knows it's scary. And Lena, well, we know she's scared to do anything too crazy. Otherwise, she would have answered the call years ago. But we also know that she cares about her friend. Otherwise, she would have just ignored Nemi's fears. So what happens next? Well, when Nemi goes to the lake, she takes a small fire with her. But when she throws the burning branches into the water, nothing happens. It's too late. She's too afraid. And then suddenly, the darkness lifts. And for the first time in a long time, she sees the moon shining bright in the sky. She laughs, a sound full of hope and fear, and lets the wind blow her hair around her face. Now, this moment is perfect. Nemi didn't save the world, but in some small way, she made it a little bit better. And that's okay. Sometimes wanting to make the world a better place doesn't mean we have to do something big. Sometimes it just means showing up and acknowledging what we're afraid of. That's it for today's episode. But please remember, you can find more information about the course in the description below. When the lantern returned, it was empty. The lake knew this. It had watched the girl take it, watched her disappear into the fading light. For a moment, there was only silence. The wind stirred, whispering through the reeds. The crickets chimed their nightly chorus. And on the surface of the lake, the reflection of the lantern quivered, then vanished. The lake had sent the lantern away with the girl. Or perhaps it had been the girl who took it, claiming it as her own. But either way, it had drifted for years. Across rivers that forgot their names. Over cities pulsing with neon and noise. Through deserts where wind had never met water. When the lantern that returned was not the same as when it had left. Its glass was scarred, its frame bent, but inside, the flame still breath-soft, slow, steady, not bright, but certain. Nemi cradled it in silence. She didn't ask where it had been. She didn't ask what it had seen. She simply watched. For 2 nights, the lantern sat by the lake, bathing the reeds in its gentle glow, reflecting in the placid water. 2 nights of quiet companionship. Then on the 3rd night, when the lake stilled and the rain slowed to a hush, the flame flickered. Once, twice, then bloomed into a memory. A boy in a city of towers. He sat on a rooftop, knees to chest, a map folded beside him like wings too tired to open. He held the lantern in his hands, not knowing how it came to him. He whispered names into it. Some were real, some were just wishes, and the flame listened. It never answered, but the boy no longer felt alone. A woman in a house of silence. She hadn't spoken in years, not since the war. She found the lantern on her doorstep, wrapped in cloth, warm to the touch. Each night, she lit it with no match, and in its glow, she began to hum. A lullaby she thought she'd forgotten. A lullaby that once belonged to her son, a child in a field of smoke. The world around her had burned, but the lantern floated down like a falling star, and when she held it, the fire inside turned to water. She poured it over the earth, and from ash, green returned. Nemi saw it all, felt it all, and when the final image faded, she wept. Not from sorrow, but from the lake watching, whispered in ripples. Even those who leave carry pieces of us, and sometimes they bring back more than they took. Then the lantern was quiet. The flame dwindled, leaving only embers, and Nemi, cradling the lantern, knew it would be empty again. The lake had given her so much, memories she never owned, stories she could never tell. But in their telling, she found something precious, a connection to the world, to herself. She woke before sunrise, the lantern resting on her chest, its warmth imprinted on her skin. Her dreams lingered, faces, places, emotions that weren't hers, yet had echoed within her. She knew she couldn't keep them. Yet the thought of letting go brought a fresh wave of sorrow. As if sensing her struggle, the lake murmured, "They are not yours to hold, but yours to pass on." With newfound clarity, Nemi rose. She dressed in layers against the morning chill and walked to the shore. The sky was a canvas of soft pinks and blues, mirroring the turmoil in her heart. She placed the lantern at the edge of the water, its reflection trembling. Then drifting out into the lake, she watched it go, feeling a profound sense of loss, yet an even deeper sense of purpose. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the land, Nemi returned to the village. The townspeople gathered, drawn by an invisible thread to the spot where the lantern had rested. They found her waiting, her face etched with determination. "I have something to show you," she said, her voice echoing with newfound strength. The villagers followed her to the training grounds, where a circle of stones marked the sacred space. In the center, a weathered well stood silent, its bucket long gone. Nemineth knelt before it. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Bringer of stories, keeper of memories, hear my plea. Guide our lost and wandering. Bring them safely home to me." When she opened her eyes, they shone with conviction. She shared what she had seen, heard, and felt by the lake. The villagers listened, some with skepticism, others with intrigue. Finally, an elder spoke, his voice gruff with emotion. "You would have us believe the lake itself speaks, that it sends messages to those who seek it, answers to those who listen. Not only that," Nemi added softly, "it keeps watch over our memories, both the beautiful and the painful, waiting for the right time to return them." There was a long silence, broken only by the rustling leaves. Then another villager spoke. "And what if we don't recognize these returned memories? What if they are not ours to bear?" Nemi turned, meeting their gaze directly. "We will know, we will feel in our deepest selves the echo of truth. And if it is too much to bear, we can always choose to share the burden. For the weight of a single memory is lighter when carried by many hearts." Her words hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. The villagers murmured among themselves, their voices hushed but eager. As the day wore on, more came forward, sharing their own experiences by the lake, their encounters with the strange, magical occurrences that defied explanation. And as each tale unfolded, Nemi saw a shift in the crowd. Fear gave way to wonder, skepticism to curiosity. By late afternoon, when the sun dipped towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the gathering, a young woman named Lena stepped forward. She was known for her quiet strength, her ability to find solace in the face of hardship. "I have never spoken of this before," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "But after the attack, after we lost everything, I wandered by the lake. I was so lost in grief, in anger, that I didn't notice the sky growing dark or the wind rising to a storm. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder, a presence beside me that was both familiar and comforting. I turned, but there was no one there. Yet I felt as though something had walked with me home that night. And in the days that followed, whenever I felt overwhelmed, I returned to the lake, and somehow, some way, I felt stronger, more at peace." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lena continued, "I never understood it then. But now, thanks to Nemi, I think I do. The lake was sending me signs, guiding me, reminding me that I was not alone." As the last rays of sunlight faded, Nemi gathered the villagers closer. She spoke softly, yet her words rang with conviction. "The lake is not just a body of water. It is a living, breathing entity that has witnessed our joys and sorrows, our triumphs and tragedies. It holds our memories, our stories, our very essence. It reaches out to us in times of need, offering solace, guidance, and sometimes a gentle nudge towards healing. It is a silent guardian, a patient listener, and an eternal wellspring of strength." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "Tonight, let us honor the lake. Let us listen to its whispers, for they carry wisdom beyond our understanding. Let us share our stories, our burdens, our hopes, and dreams, for in doing so, we lighten our load and enrich our souls. Let us open our hearts to the lake's embrace, for it has loved us long before we knew it, and it will continue to love us even when we do not see it." Her voice echoed with newfound power as she led the villagers in a chant. "Oh, lake of whispers, keeper of memories, we gather before you tonight, open hearts and open minds, ready to listen, ready to learn, ready to love. Guide us, protect us, heal us, and remind us that even in the darkest moments, hope flickers like a flame, and that flame can be our light. As the moon replaced the sun, bathing the world in silver light, the villagers fell silent. They stood in a circle, facing the lake, their hands intertwined, forming a chain of unity. And as the first stars twinkled above them, the lake stirred. It whispered in rustling reeds and lapping waves, sharing tales of bravery, resilience, and unwavering hope. The villagers listened, their faces illuminated by the ethereal glow of the moonlight, their hearts touched by the timeless wisdom of the lake. When the first rays of sunlight kissed the horizon, signaling the start of a new day, Nemi stood before the lake. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, knowing that she had played a part in bridging the gap between her people and the mystical entity that had touched their lives. The seasons turned, not quickly, not harshly, but like pages in an old book, worn smooth by the hands of many readers. The lanterns still came and went. The lake still whispered, and Nemi, now older, taller, her eyes steady like the horizon, began to dream of something that had never been made before. A new kind of lantern. Not one to hold light, not one to keep it, but one to echo it. She spent days in the woods gathering pieces not from metal or glass, but from the voices of others. A thread of laughter from a child who sang to the trees, a wind chime melody caught in a spider's web, a question whispered by a traveler who had no name, and the sigh of the lake when no one was watching. She wove them together not with tools, but with listening, and when it was done, it looked like nothing at all, just a hollow shape made of wind and shadow and memory. But when she placed it by the water, it began to hum, soft, low, like breath after crying, like silence that finally felt safe. The villagers gathered. They expected a flame. They expected a glow. What they received was something else. A voice, not Nemi's, not the lake's, but theirs. And so that's how the world ended. Not with a bang or a whimper, but with a voice that carried across the water. They hadn't always understood each other. Nemi and the lake. When she was just a girl, she couldn't tell if his murmurs were friendly. As the years passed and the whispers became clearer, they learned to speak the same language of currents and reeds, of rain and reflection. Each evening, as dusk bled into twilight, the villagers would come to the shore and pass the lantern around. Whoever held it felt its warmth seep into their hands, its glow chase away the shadows in their eyes. Then they'd walk back into the dark, carrying the flame that Nemi had tended so carefully. But lately, the whispers by the lake had grown distant, and tonight, the air hung heavy with unspoken words and unshed tears. Nemi sat alone on the bank, tracing patterns in the mud. How could she fix something that wasn't broken? The lake's whispers had always been there, guiding, consoling, sometimes scaring. Yet now she feared they were fading, leaving her with only memories and regrets. When the others arrived, their faces were grim, etched with lines of worry and lost love. Lena, the village elder, stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. Nemi, she began, her voice raspy with age and sorrow. We've come to ask you to show us the way. Confused, Nemi tilted her head, searching for an answer in the shifting shadows. What do you mean? We want to go home. One of the villagers blurted out, his eyes desperate, to see our loved ones one last time. At first, Nemi didn't understand their words. It sounded like a foolish request. Why would they want to return when death awaited them there? Then she saw the longing in their eyes, the ache in their hearts. She knew their story better than her own. This village nestled between hills and a whispering lake had been their sanctuary for generations. After a great calamity, they'd fled here, leaving behind everything but their lives and their grief. For decades, they'd honored their sacrifice by tending to the eternal flame, keeping it burning brightly to honor their lost memories. Now they wanted to go home. Nemi stared into the flickering firelight, seeing the reflections of their tormented faces. She thought of the countless nights she'd spent by this very lake, sharing stories and laughter with these same people. Now their joy was gone, replaced by a chilling quiet. The weight of their request pressed down on her, like a physical burden. She knew she couldn't refuse them. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the land, Nemi led them through the dense forest. The ancient trees loomed over them like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches reaching out as if to touch the heavens. The path was long and arduous, leading them deeper into the heart of the woods. With each step, the villagers grew weaker, their bodies weary from the journey that spanned not only miles, but lifetimes. Nemi watched over them, her heart aching for their pain. She wished she could ease their suffering, but all she had was the flame. Finally, as the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, they reached their destination, a clearing bathed in the soft glow of morning light. In the center stood a magnificent oak, its leaves rustling softly in the gentle breeze. This was the heart tree, the source of the village's magic, where the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest. But now it was drained and withered, mirroring the despair that clung to the villagers. With trembling hands, Nemi handed them the lantern, its light illuminating the anguish etched on their faces. One by one, they stepped forward, their eyes fixed on the distant horizon. As they approached the tree, their forms began to shimmer, their outlines blurring at the edges. With a final whispered goodbye, they vanished, leaving Nemi alone in the clearing. She stood there for what felt like hours, the silence broken only by the mournful cry of a distant bird. When she returned to the lake, the villagers were gone. Only the faint scent of wildflowers lingered in the air, a ghostly reminder of their presence. Nemi sat on the bank, cradling the lantern in her lap, its warmth no longer comforting, its light no longer guiding. The whispers of the lake sounded distant, as though they, too, had retreated into the shadows. Days turned into weeks, and the wound in Nemi's heart refused to heal. She wandered the forest, seeking solace in the rustling leaves and the babbling brooks, but found only echoes of the laughter that once filled these woods. The weight of her solitude grew heavier with each passing moment, threatening to consume her whole. Then one night, as the moon painted silver streaks across the lake, Nemi had a dream. She saw the villagers gathered around the heart tree, their faces alive with joy and anticipation. They weren't fading away, they were coming back. But they weren't the same. They would change, transformed by their journey. Nemi awoke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. The dream felt so real, so vibrant, that she could still hear their laughter echoing in her ears. But as the hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky, the memory of the dream began to fade. Still, something had shifted within her, a tiny spark of hope flickering in the vast darkness. With newfound determination, Nemi returned to the lake. The water was still and serene, reflecting the cloudless sky above. She sat on the bank, closing her eyes against the blinding light, and waited. The whispers of the lake were faint at first, like distant voices carried on the wind, yet they grew stronger with each passing moment until they filled her ears. "Why are you here, child of the flame?" the lake asked, its voice deep and resonant. "Have you come to take your leave?" Nemi opened her eyes and gazed at the rippling surface of the water. "No, great lake," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm here to listen." And so that's how the world ended, not with a bang or a whimper, but with a voice that carried across the water.